Welcome to Womanhood GFF, God, Friends, and Family. We are continuing our look at Peter and that how he became we might call him a scatterbrain, person who was spontaneous but yet not dependable. Someone who said they would be there, but then when things got pretty tough and was scared that he wasn't there. To a strong leader in the early church. To a very courageous, determined man of God. We talked of how Jesus said that he and the other disciples would scatter and betray. And Peter insisted that he would not do that. And the other disciples did too. They sort of joined in a unison agreement that they would be there with Jesus. We ended with what happened in the life of Peter. Can what happened to Peter help me be stronger in my faith? What made the difference? And today we're going to talk about that difference. The difference was very simple. One particular event. You say it was the crucifixion. No, it wasn't even the crucifixion. He died on the cross. No, it wasn't the death on the cross. They had seen people die on the cross. They had seen people hang on the cross. True, this was different. This was Jesus. I understand all that. But that's not the one thing that happened that made the difference. That would put those men, those disciples, to the point of being someone who would say, hey, yeah, you know, I know that guy. To people who would say, yes, I know that guy. And for someone to threaten their life and throw them in prison, to torture them, to where that they say you can live or die if you'll deny, to where that they would just stand there and say, you just have to take my life because I'm not denying. What would make them so strong, so determined, so brave, so courageous? It was not just Jesus being crucified. It was not just because they knew this guy Jesus. It wasn't just because they saw him raise people from the dead and heal the lame and heal the sick and heal the blind. It wasn't just those things. It was this one event. Christ resurrection. Christ resurrection. Out of all the faiths, and all the various beliefs in this world, and of all of them whose leaders and founders have all passed away, you could go to their tomb, to their monuments, where their bones to this day and their ashes are there, except for the faith of the Christian. Because there's one remarkable difference. Our leader's not there. Because of his resurrection, he is alive. Do you know how exciting that is? I just get so excited just sit here telling you that I don't know if I could sit still. I mean, you know how exciting that is? That of all of the isms, schisms, religions there are that anybody can come up with, that either has or still are worshiping in some kind of organized form, to this day, there's only one faith that had a leader that died and rose from the grave. Only one. And that's Jesus Christ. Wow. I'm so glad that I have him into my heart, into my life, and to know that the faith that I have is not in a stone or a tree or a person or an event or a place or even the words written in a book. What I have is real, and what I have is alive. And you can have it too. And when you understand how real and how alive that is, for Peter it was what put the nail in the coffin. It's what anchored the corner and the foundation of everything that now at this point he really was willing to die for. And this is the process of how he got to that point. right after Peter and the other disciples boasted of their loyalty to Christ, to stand to the end. I mean, they were all in unison for that. They all went to the Garden of Gethsemane. I've already alluded to that. And how that Jesus asked them to sit while he prayed. Jesus took Peter, James, and John over to him to another spot to pray. He shared his feelings about the events that were about to take place. Jesus began to pray. Then he went and found those three guys sound asleep. They were all big talk earlier of how that they'll die with him, but they can't even pray with him. They couldn't even stay awake to pray with him. This happened a couple of times in the garden. Then when the soldiers came to arrest Jesus, various events occurred, and all the disciples freaked out. And in the same chapter of Mark chapter 14 and verse 50, the Bible says, and they all forsook him and fled. We're not even talking about that this happened like weeks after, months after, years after. We're talking Jesus just told them during the day, just the afternoon before, that you guys are going to trip up, scatter. And they all said, oh, well, you got to be thinking of somebody else. It is not happened to us, Jesus. We're there with you. And it wasn't even 24 hours. And an event comes with soldiers. And the Bible says in verse 50 that they all forsook him and fled. They all did. I'm sure that was pretty scary. You got soldiers coming, not just 2 or 3. There could have been several soldiers. Maybe there were 20. Maybe there were 50. And they're coming with that armor and those swords and their spears and all the stuff going. And they're coming after one man. And they were afraid that maybe they'd get caught too. The Bible says they fled. They all did exactly what Jesus said that they would do. Later in verses 67 through 71 is where we see where Peter did deny Jesus. Peter even resorted to cursing in verse 71. And the rooster crowed. And as soon as he heard that rooster crow, Peter denied Christ just as he said he would. And just when it happened, the Bible says in verse 72, and when he thought thereon, he remembered exactly what Jesus said. Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows in the morning. No, not me. Not me, Lord. That's not happening to me. Yes, it's going to happen. You're going to do it before sunrise. You're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. Twice. The Bible says, and when he thought thereon, he remembered that conversation. And then the Bible says that Peter wept. And this weeping wasn't some little sniff, some little teary eye where he was a macho guy and didn't want anybody to know he cried. This wept, when you look it up in the Strong Concordance, that hopefully you have now, that when he wept, it was a wail aloud. I mean, it was a broken... it was however a man could just wail out loud. Noises and just a weeping from inside of his gut, just pouring out of his chest and out of his mouth, to where he probably just put his hands on his head out of just pure grief and shame and just wailing loudly his shame. I can't believe I did it. I said I wouldn't do that. I said I wouldn't deny him. I said I'd die with him, and look what I did. I did it. Peter was broken. Have you been broken about a sin that you've had? Where something you just denied that you would ever go there, do that, say that, be there. And then you were. And we reach that point where we just feel so ashamed of what we've done that we just weep. We don't just teary-eye up, we weep. Beg God for His forgiveness and His mercy. Peter was so ashamed. I'm sure Peter's thinking, oh great day in the morning. Now what? Now what can happen? I've done it. I've denied him. What good am I going to be to him now? I mean, now what? Now what? Well, how can he use me now? Look what I've done. I have really messed up. I'm just thrown away. These past 3 years of following him and seeing him and watching him do all the wonderful things that he's done. And he's told me that I would do this, and I told him I wouldn't. But I did. He wept, and he wept loudly. And I'm sure it didn't last a few minutes. I'm sure he wept for hours. Just wondering now, what am I going to do? Feeling worthless, ashamed. God's not gonna love me now. I mean, what can Jesus do with me now? We'll find out what Jesus can do with Peter, and that he does use Peter, and that he will and wants to use you too. There is no sin that's so big that he cannot forgive. There is no such thing as he can't love, because he can. He can love the chiefest sinners, the biggest wrong that you could ever imagine. God says, I still forgive you, and I love you. And as I weep at times in my life where I have messed up, and as you may be recalling as Peter did, as he thought upon these things, and there's things that you are thinking of that you know that you've done wrong, and it just makes you ashamed. God is there to forgive you. His hand is reaching down. You just need to reach up and take it. Email me with any comments or questions you have at womanhoodgff@yahoo.com. I sure appreciate your time that you take to watch this clip. We hope to wrap this up in the next one. God bless you, and thank you so much for spending this time with me.